Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. And today we are going to be joined by an established San Francisco writer. Her name is Gennifer Choldenko, and her latest book is called Chasing Secrets. It's a novel published by Wendy Lamb Books, which is an imprint of Random House Children's Books. Did I get it all right?
That's perfect. Yes.
Yay, what a good start. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
This is your 7th book.
It's actually my 12th.
But somebody told me in the press stuff it was 7.
Oh, well.
Do they not know how to count?
Maybe they didn't count. Yeah. I do picture books also, and so maybe they aren't counting those.
Oh, they're not counting those.
Yeah.
12th book?
Yeah.
Wow. Holy Toledo. Now, 3 of those books, the non-illustrated kind, are part of what has become called a trilogy.
Correct.
The Al Capone Alcatraz series.
Yes.
Now, when I saw the first title in that series, and I didn't know you then, I didn't know your publisher who were talking about this book, I said to myself, this is one of the best titles I've ever seen. And I've always wanted to know, what, where, and when did Al Capone Does My Shirts become a title?
I was about halfway through the book, and I had developed this character who lived on the island because her father was the warden. And she was kind of obnoxious and used to like to brag to people about living on Alcatraz. And the kids, this is the true part, the kids all...
This is true. There are kids in Marin whom I worked with when they weren't kids anymore, and they were still bragging.
Yes, yeah. That's true.
It's very true.
Good
very
point.
True.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. It's really a badge for many people.
Yeah, yeah. So there's this young woman who was bragging about it.
Yes, because the kids actually, and this is the true part, they went to school in San Francisco, and so they would take a boat across, and they weren't supposed to talk about living on Alcatraz, but my character did, and so I figured she would be bragging that these famous gangsters were doing her laundry. And so I had that in my head. And when I got to the research where I found out that Al Capone's first job on Alcatraz was in the laundry, I was like, whoa, this is too cool.
What a godsend that he was working in.
Yes.
Laundry.
I was like, yes.
Now he went on in your trilogy to be Al Capone Does Homework.
Yes.
And finally, I guess Al Capone Shines My Shoes. This is all essentially the same character having all these things done.
Yes.
She believes, or somebody believes, by Al.
Yes. Well, Shines My Shoes, his previous prison was Atlanta, and he worked in the shoe department there. So I figured he had the ability to shine shoes very well. Mm-hmm, and there were stories that Alcatraz people talked about giving, the guards would give Al their hat and he would doff it, kind of clean it and give it back to them. So I used that. I thought the shoes might be a better way of doing that, but that was the concept. Homework was kind of a leap, I have to admit.
Well, not only is it a great title, it turned out to be a very great and successful book. It won something called the Newberry. It won a Newberry honor.
Correct.
What is that and how important is it?
Well, I think that for me, the Newberry is the most exciting thing that could possibly happen to you. And this was sort of like runner-up to the Newberry. So it's a silver instead of a gold. And it was really exciting for me.
This was an award promulgated by the American Library Association.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yes. They give out a Newberry every year. It
also made you a New York Times best-selling author.
Yes.
A Book Sense best-selling author. Book Sense being the marketing name for independent booksellers. And I've heard just recently from someone who claims she's working with you from New York, called your publicist.
Yes.
And that you're a tireless on-the-road promoter. and that you've kind of just come off the road.
Yes. Yesterday, I landed in San Francisco after a 10-day, the second leg of the tour, which was 10 days.
Uh-huh.
So, but it's really fun. I get to, they treat me really well. I get to stay in nice hotels. I get to talk to the kids, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
That's
really probably the best part of it, I think.
Absolutely.
Because I've dealt with authors on the road, and the hotel's nice, the food's nice, but there's a certain thrilling aspect to the experience of being this close to those kids that you've really written for.
Yes. And
seeing how they react, whether it's positive or negative, and they'll let you know if it's negative sometimes.
Oh, yeah. So. Kids, you can't. You get about a minute and a half with them, and then you better perform.
Yeah, don't sit down. Get up. It's your turn.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think we should now get to Chasing Secrets.
Okay.
And this is a book set in San Francisco of 1900.
Correct.
The turn of the century. And you give us a couple of shots or a couple of different kinds of society in San Francisco. One of them seems to me to be summed up by the fact that Aunt Hortense writes 2 menus a day, one for the family, one for the help, and, if necessary, a 3rd menu for afternoon tea. Now, what society is Auntie Hortense living in?
Well, upper class San Francisco in 1900 lived, in fabulous Nob Hill in these spectacular houses. I used a little of, the Spreckles mansion as inspiration. Mm-hmm. And Spreckles was both a sugar magnate and he was a newspaper publisher. And so I borrowed a little from that. And, it's funny, San Francisco was not as rule-bound as New York society. And a lot of the people that had money had just recently come into it. And so it was a little more Wild West money.
Nouveau riche.
Exactly.
Yeah, those people. Now, Lizzie, who's really the main character, she goes to Miss Barstow's snobby, I thought the word was finishing school.
Yes.
Okay. And she doesn't quite fit in there. You tell us that she sits in her usual spot, which is 6 feet from everyone else.
Correct.
That's Lizzie.
Yes, that's Lizzie.
Okay.
She's a bit odd man out.
Well, Lizzie's removed from everyone else in other ways as well. And we'll talk about some of those when we come back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
Chasing Secrets is the book we're talking about today with the author, Gennifer Choldenko. And it's a book for middle school. Is that what I should say?
Yes.
Young adult readers. Somewhere in the material it says age 10 and up. Do you agree with that?
I would say 9 to 13.
Okay.
Although a lot of adults like this book, and they also like Al Capone Does My Shirts. Of the 12 books that I've written, those 2 seem to be also popular with adults.
Well, they're taken in by the title of the first one. And it could be blank pages after that. Well, the Kirkus Review says this about your book. They call it a solid story of friendship, mystery, and one girl's perseverance. Wow. Is that true? In which a health scare, the plague, and its rumors mirror even today's epidemics. And they do. The total fear, the irrational responses, and so forth and so on. So I think that's a very good evaluation. Lizzie Kennedy, that's her last name. She's also different from her peers by what she wants to be when she grows up. She wants to be a doctor, of all things. What? Where did you dig that up?
Well, there were a few, very few, but there were a few female doctors, and Lizzie's father is a doctor, and she really idolizes her father. And her big brother had thought he would be a doctor, but had decided against it, and that was something that really upset the father. And so Lizzie, I think, also wanted to please him.
She wants to be a doctor, but only a doctor like her dad. What kind of doctor was he?
Well, it's interesting in doing the research. 115 years ago, we really did not know anything at all. Yeah. It turns out you were if you wanted to give birth and you decided to give birth in a hospital, you were twice as likely to die than if you gave birth at home. So you did not want to send someone you loved to the hospital. The doctors did not know much. Germ theory was in its infancy. And so, some doctors, like there was another doctor in the book, Dr. Rumelad, he was all about the money. And if you were a wealthy person and you were sick, the doctor might move in with you, kind of the Michael Jackson approach.
So that was one way to be a doctor.
But Lizzie's father would often take trade for his services. And, at this point, you did not want your kid to become a doctor because they really didn't make much money and they didn't have a lot of respect. And as we see, they really didn't know that much. Mm.
Well, but he would also go and stay with the sick patient. And in that sense, it was a similar approach.
True. Well, he was willing to really travel to places where there weren't doctors.
He even traveled to Marin.
He did. He traveled to Marin.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which at that point was far away.
It was very far away. So, he had his heart was in the right place, and not all doctors, that wasn't true of all doctors.
This brings us, perhaps, to the next major character in quotes, the plague, or is there a plague? And how it plays out in Better Off San Francisco versus San Francisco Chinatown. This is really where you get into, the class structure and class battles. Tell us about that.
Right. Well, it is true that the plague did come to San Francisco, and it is also true that it had come from Honolulu. And in Honolulu, the rich white guys' approach and the way of dealing with the plague was to burn Chinatown to the ground. So the Chinese in San Francisco knew that, and they were afraid. When they recognized that the plague had come to San Francisco, they hid it. And some of the rich white guys also hid it because it would have brought commerce to a screeching halt. There would be no railroad traffic, no imports, no exports, no tourist trade. And so a lot of people it was in their best interest as they saw it to hide the plague. But of course, you can't hide a disease.
No, you can't. And so you get the situation where Chinatown is quarantined.
Correct.
And Lizzie, what is she, about 11, 12?
13.
13? She's a young kid. And yet she gets involved in the plague through a very interesting and I would say lovable way. Her family, the Kennedys, have a Chinese cook. His name is
Jing.
And a son whose name is Noah. And that's how she gets involved. What happens?
Right. Well, Jing gets caught in the quarantine, and he knew something was up, and so he had hid his son in his room in Lizzie's house. And then he gets caught in the quarantine, and Noah is stuck up there.
Now, this made me think of Pacific Heights today. There's some of those houses have those, towers and stuff, or, like the painted ladies with high-up attic rooms. So it really would be possible to hide somebody.
Yes.
In plain sight.
Yes.
Yeah. And she was getting food to him and messages by way of a large orange cat.
Correct.
And that's how she gets dug into the whole business.
Right. I think she was, because she was sort of odd man out, as I said, and she didn't have friends. I think Noah was her first friend. And so they really bonded pretty quickly, even though they came from very different cultures.
He was really more like her than anybody else at Miss Barstow's.
Right.
For example. Yeah. Yeah.
And he had a lot of ambition also. And so they shared that.
The business of the plague and San Francisco's response to it by various class levels is a continuing theme throughout the book. And what this shows, it says, one of your reviewers, Booklist, I think, said this, that one of your greatest achievements in all that you've written is being able to package history within a story, as you do here when you tell the story of the two kinds of plague vaccine. It's amazing.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Has that taken a lot of effort to kind of make that your way of doing it?
Well, actually, I'm basically 12 at heart. And so
that's helpful.
Yeah, it really is. And the details that I find intriguing, kids also find intriguing, it turns out. And so it's really fun to try and embed interesting details into the story. It really adds a lot.
Hey, we've had a good time in this interview so far, but I don't think we've spent enough time with Lizzie Kennedy. We're going to remedy that when we get back.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
Gennifer Choldenko, she is our guest. She has written, well, either 7 books or 12 books, depending upon how you count. The books that we're interested in, 7. If you take the whole oeuvre, as we say en français, it's 12. So, and the book that she's talking about today is called Chasing Secrets. It's a novel. It's published by Wendy Lamb Books, and Wendy Lamb Books is an imprint of Random House, and my mother's maiden name is Shike. I mean, get all of the credits in. And our friends over at Booklist said about this book, this engrossing mystery perfectly balances heart and intrigue, proving once again, this is what I was talking about, Choldenko's talent for packaging history within a story that kids are bound to love. Now, you just come off the road and sprinted in here to do this interview. Are they loving it on the road, the kids?
Absolutely. I'm having a great fun with them. I do this little improv where we make up our own plague disease, and it's really fun. And they play doctors, and we have practice doing dying sounds and fall on the floor. It's just great.
Falling. I wish I went to school now. I like falling on the floor. I think it's fun. Could you talk a little bit more about Lizzie Kennedy? I mean, I write down things like courageous, independent, a real doer, let's do stuff. Can you go on, talk more, get a little deeper?
Well, I think Lizzie has those traits, but she also has an ability to self-sabotage herself.
Oh, does she?
Yeah. And I think she comes from a little of my daughter who wants to be a doctor. She's 16. Mm-hmm. And she comes a little from me and a little that's made up. I did not realize, how perseverant she is until people started reading it. And that was the first thing they said. And that happens to be probably my strongest trait. So I think sometimes something will come through in a character that you don't.
We used to call that stubborn.
Yes. Well, there's that take on it too. I think my family would call it stubborn also. You know how stubborn Mom is.
But one of the things you said that she gets in trouble, and I think one of the ways she gets in trouble is that she sees things too directly and simply. and without all the adumbrations that might be there. But that's very true for someone her age.
Correct.
And parents, I think, make a mistake when they shut that down and say, that's stupid, there's more to it than that, and so on.
Right.
Oh.
But I think, that courageousness, I think kids who are 11, 12, 13 are really courageous, and they are really idealistic, and they have that energy to make things right. And so I gave all of those characteristics to Lizzie. Noah and Lizzie. That's a whole other level theme of this book. And I think you kind of get to it and sum it up at the very end. Would you read that part of the book with us, please? Sure. At 3:45, I check to see where everyone is in the house. Papa is in his room. He is still so sad about Billy that he can hardly eat. I know he will get through it, just as he did when Mama died, but right now it's hard. Maggie is on the porch knitting. She's almost all better. Aunt Hortense and Uncle Carl are at their house. Jing is in the kitchen, adding sugar to a boiling pot of apples. The way he watches me, I know he knows that I'm meeting Noah. Lizzie, he says as I open the back door. Yes, sir. The word pops out of my mouth without me even thinking about it. Papa and Uncle Carl are always sir, but never Jing. Jing's shoulders pull back. His head rises. Our eyes meet. He doesn't try to make me laugh. He has no frog in his pocket, no quarter in his ear, no feather or stone up his sleeve. He stirs the apples. Your mama would have been proud of you, he says. His words are warm inside me as I walk out to the barn. He has never said anything like this before. Orange Tom lurks in the foggy, darkening afternoon, his thick fur matted on one side, tail flecked with bits of leaves and straw. I open the barn door. Noah stands petting Juliet's muzzle. Lizzie, he takes my hand. I'm sorry about Billy. The heat of his hand warms mine. We start to dance. Our first steps are stiff, then slowly the rhythm builds. My hand feels solid on Noah's shirt as we circle the stable. Noah steadies me. I don't care if I make a wrong step when I'm with him. We float together, breathing in the sweet smell of alfalfa. Only Juliet watches, slurping her water. John Henry is asleep. I don't want this to end. I hold on to every minute. The world is kinder with Noah holding my hand. When he lets go, he crouches and pounces. He jumps back onto his springy legs and then up onto his hands. One day I'll see Noah perform his lion dance in his costume with all of his friends. For now, it's time to go. Aunt Hortense has come a long way, but I can't upset her. Not now. Not after all we've been through. One day things will be different. One day she'll understand that Noah is my friend. I'll be back soon, Noah says. I nod. By the chicken coop, I capture Orange Tom. He doesn't give me a chase this time. He simply allows me to scoop him up and carry him to my room. I write one last message. My hands shake as I wrap the red thread around the note. University of California in 5 years. Noah, save me a chair. I'll be there. Lizzie.
That's a great final note. A great final note. And something happens earlier in that reading, which just occurred to me. You write, the word sir pops out of my mouth, Lizzie's mouth, without me even thinking about it. And that's said comes out of her mouth in relation to a Chinese person.
Right. Who has never been called sir before.
Yeah.
So that's a really big moment.
And, you can write an essay and say kids change and something happens. But here it is in fiction, in one brief passage, what essayists would take a long time to get across, that there is a possibility of changing, that prejudice can become understanding, and perhaps love.
Exactly. Yes, I do believe people can change. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't want to be too serious about this. Chasing Secrets is a fun read as well. And it's been lovely having Gennifer Choldenko with us to talk about it. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.